Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the first of a series of webinars that we're going to be hosting. We're just going to give it an extra 2 or 3 minutes to let a few more people arrive in the lobby, and then we'll get cracking with the webinar. So if there's anything that you need to do, now's your chance, but we'll be starting in approximately 2 minutes.
Brilliant. There's still 70 people to join.
We're up to 17 so far, so it's a good start.
Maybe there's some from the VM as well. Looks like it.
We'll give it another minute and then we'll see if we don't get any more entrants, then we'll get started.
Sounds good.
One or two people coming in fashionably late, which we like to see. Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. We're joined today by my colleague Mark Lawrance of Pressac. We have Trinquet of Verdantix and Henrik Nyby from Virtual Manufacturing. So, Mark, do you want to kick us off with a little bit about yourself and about Pressac and what you do?
Yeah, so good afternoon, everybody. My name's Mark Lawrance. I'm Director of Strategic Accounts at Pressac. Pressac is a long-established UK-based sensor manufacturer, been on the go for nigh on 70 years. And the role we play in any sort of smart building environment is, from a hardware perspective, sensor manufacturer. I personally have been involved in the intelligent workplace arena for probably approaching 20 years. Prior to joining Pressac, I was on the software side doing enterprise level complex solution engineering, which used software platforms, IoT, consultancy, a whole range of different things. But my focus now is on encouraging sort of the uptake of Pressac technology across the wider marketplace.
Thank you, Mark. And over to you, Joy.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Joy Trinquet. I'm a senior analyst on the real estate and built environment team at Verdantix. Verdantix is an independent research and consulting firm, and we cover lots of different areas of the market. I think we have up to 7 different practices now, including EHS, industrial transformation, net zero, ESG, and then the real estate built environment team, which is where I'm based within. In terms of my focus areas, I tend to focus on the space and workplace side of things, so about the occupant experience, indoor air quality, and anything along those lines.
Joy, and over to you, Henrik.
Thank you very much, and hi everyone, and thanks for the opportunity, first of all, to represent Virtual Manufacturing UK today. So my name is Henrik, and I'm working for Virtual Manufacturing UK as a manufacturing consultant. I'm based in the West Midlands, whilst my colleagues are based further up north in Glasgow. And in essence, we are a manufacturing engineering and service provider that specializes in operational excellence, leveraging lean manufacturing principles. We do work across manufacturing industries with a parent company in Sweden and a sister company operating in Bangkok in Thailand. So traditionally, our services have included lean manufacturing, consultancy, virtual engineering, assembly and production, flow and layout projects. However, we have increasingly shifted our focus to helping manufacturers to transition a little bit from merging conventional and digital tools in manufacturing. And I think one such notable example is in our involvement as a system integrator, or maybe call it a solution provider, and supporting manufacturers to monitoring their energy consumption at a granular level in real time and over time. And often that is backed by the flexibility and scalability, but also the robustness of Pressac sensors. So we are happy to be a technical partner with Pressac. So nice to meet you all.
Thank you so much, Henrik. That's very good of you to say. So the title of the webinar is the Optimizing IoT Data Integration and Choosing the Right Sensors. So it's going to be very much a sort of discussion-based webinar. If you have any questions, then feel free to type them into the chat. We can answer those questions as we go along, or we'll have a Q&A session at the end where you'll be able to put your questions forward and we'll be able to answer those for you. So kicking us off, we're going to start with you, Joy. And what does the current IoT sensor landscape look like right now? How are you guys at Verdantix seeing things?
Yeah, great, thank you. So I'll first take it from like kind of the high level customer point of view, which is just no overall trend of customers from across all various types of industries, whether it's commercial real estate or manufacturing or higher education, really anything, are really starting to really increasingly deploy these sensors and gather the real-time data, really to make these data-driven decisions. But they really just want to get a holistic view of their performance across the entire portfolio, which then also means, beyond the classic occupancy or indoor air quality sensors, it's the more innovative sensors that help them get access to data from the legacy equipment that might lack the modern connectivity needed. And taking on more kind of the vendor point of view from looking at the IoT sensor landscape, we have lots of vendors from various areas across the landscape, from some of the big four to the more niche specialized one, as well as some of the software solution providers are increasingly starting to launch these new suites of sensors. Some are only offer really specific occupancy sensors of different kinds, whether it's room sensors, desk sensors, open area sensors, while others are offering kind of that more comprehensive suites that include, a mix of occupancy, environmental, and then energy meter sensors, along with gateways that help kind of communicate everything. Another thing I want to highlight is that some of the providers we're seeing in the landscape are kind of manufacturing the sensors themselves, or are the lead manufacturer of it, while others are kind of white labeling existing sensors, which is not something to be wary of or aware of, I guess, overall. And that, one of the problems I think we're seeing it across is a lot of these customers have deployed different suites of sensors from different providers that then thus use different communication protocols, which, or even, whether it's different open ones or even some proprietary ones, it really means that customers are now kind of struggling to find a way to make all of these work together, aggregate the data into a single solution, which is a problem point, but we'll dive deeper into that throughout the webinar. And last thing I want to mention around kind of some of the trends we're seeing is a lot of the more historical hardware sensor providers are starting to develop their own software solutions for users to use to gather and analyze that sensor data, versus others are choosing to partner with solution providers. It just depends on what their model is. I don't know if there's anything, Mark or Henrik, you want to add to that, but that's it.
Yeah, I think it's raised a good point there. And Mark, just go into a little bit about why it's so important to have reliable data from the sensors.
I think what we're seeing as well, sort of to take Joy's point one step further, is a lot of companies, whether they're industrial, manufacturing, corporate, whatever sort of industry they're in, are looking at what available data source they've got. So what incumbent data is available to them and trying to make use of that, which is obviously an incredibly logical first step. But what we're seeing obviously is that there's a delta between what's available and really the amount and volume of data that delivers significant value, where people are identifying gaps. Obviously that's where they're looking at the market to look to supplement those or close those gaps off by generating the additional data. From I guess a data quality perspective, a reliable data perspective, it's the old sort of analogy, rubbish in, rubbish out. If you're trying to base business decisions, or if you're trying to model and develop strategy off poor quality data or limited data sets, then you can only sort of extrapolate and come up with a hypothesis that is based on sort of the minimum input. The better quality data, the higher volume of data, and so I guess the more frequent data, depending upon what you're actually going to act upon it for, is critical in ensuring that you're getting the best out of it. You can have too much data. There's no point having data if you're not going to do something with it. You know, you can get data overload, and there could be a temptation to sort of, you know, generate huge amounts of data points and basically get lost in it. If you're not going to be able to action something off what you're finding, or you're going to be able to research off the back of it, then it's inherently wasteful. So having reliable data does allow you to make better decisions, and ultimately what we're seeing is it's effectively the fuel that drives the whole machine. If you know what's going on, where it's going on, when it's going on, you can use the various tools in software platforms and consultancy and third parties to understand why it's going on, and then obviously develop your understanding from it. If you've got poor input, then those decision-making processes are flawed, and you'll overcorrect, you'll waste efforts, you'll inevitably sort of spend more time trying to develop something off that poor input.
Okay, thank you for that. So, Henrik, just going further with what Mark's just said there, what kind of common challenges are people facing when it comes to data quality and accuracy and reliability, specifically around energy occupancy and environmental monitoring?
I think it's quite a key point that Mark raised about quality and reliability of having data. So for us, we'll often find some of our customers want to go into a journey where they maybe make more data-driven decisions. So in this case, it might be energy monitoring, looking at what and how energy is used, and then they would like to be able to see that in real time and make some justified decision or strategic initiatives to improve the manufacturing processes. And if you have poor quality data, it would basically hinder that adoption of the data-driven solution. And also from our point of view, it would lose the credibility as a solution provider integrating hardware and software. And if we lose that credibility and trust, meaning that it might be that actually our customers go back to the old ways of working, and that's not really what we are trying to achieve. So having that consistent and reliable stream of data definitely support our solutions that we put into the hand of the people in manufacturing. And maybe another aspect is I mentioned accuracy and reliability, but it's more that it gives us a hands-free approach or a maintenance-free approach. When you have, in this case, some sensors harvesting data on the shop floor, which are reliable and suitable for the harsh environment they might be operating in, meaning that we don't have to spend time over the life cycle of those sensors to support our clients' fault finding or troubleshooting, while you don't get that nice and consistent stream of data. So maybe that's a little bit of a point of view that we see is quite important, mainly within this data decision making and trying to provide that solution or a framework to guide our customers to gain a real insight of what's actually happening on the shop floor, and then enable them to make some justified decisions. And then, of course, you have a lot of quite interesting application that you can build on top of that further on, if you're looking at such like machine learning or artificial intelligence, or integrating data from different kinds of systems. It can be from not only energy or occupancy or temperature or pressure, what might be, but that requires that you have a quite foundation that's strong and stable. No gaps in the data.
Yeah, but it comes from, I guess, a considered deployment as well, doesn't it, Henrik? Because, you know, obviously we work quite closely together, but it's about looking at, as I said, potentially the incumbent data and to developing your learning from that, and then seeing where the gaps are. But it's about putting a layer of technology in that's appropriate at that point in time. And there isn't on device that will do everything. So it's about thinking about what the first steps are in the direction to go in, and putting a layer of tech in, and then taking that data and developing your learning and your strategy, and seeing where it goes. Because as that learning develops, and as you generate more data and you analyze it, and you sort of get that understanding of what's going on, then the direction of sort of where you want to go next might change. So as you layer things in over time, it reinforces what success looks like and what use cases you want to go with. I would question anybody that thinks they can do a one sort of stop shop solution and put a layer of tech in at the beginning and that will solve their problem. It is an evolving sort of journey that people need to go on.
Oh, yeah, I think that's true. We typically come in to solve a specific problem, and sometimes actually develop bespoke solutions. And that might require that we start with a set of technologies, but we need to make sure that the foundation is there for this digital journey that most manufacturers will sooner or later embrace. And Pressac sensor, for example, is very interoperable and plug and play. That means it's much more easily to scale, but also integrate that data with other sources of data that we find useful.
So what considerations do you think, Mark, that I don't know, solution providers should consider when they're looking for the right sensor for them? What sort of things should they really be considering?
As I said, there isn't a single solution that's going to solve everyone's problem. There's a wide range of technologies out there. There's a wide range of messaging protocols. Loads of things do loads of different things. So it's about choosing something that's fit for purpose. There's never going to be a single sort of device that will do everything. So it's looking at what data points are necessary, not necessarily how you're going to generate them, but if you can learn some data, if you can generate telemetry that will give you some understanding of what's going on, it's what can you do with it? It's very easy simply to visualize it and have a nice UI and put present the data in an aesthetically pleasing way, but that doesn't actually deliver value. And I guess I'd be interested in what Joy has to say about this. But if you get data and you've got to turn that data into something intelligible, it's got to turn into business intelligence. It's got to be actionable. It's got to actually do something for you beyond simply having a nice graph. Can you act on it? Will it influence strategy? Can you automate ongoing interactions with BMS systems or manufacturing processes? It has to do something for you. So when solution providers, or when those application layers or those middleware layers or those sort of BMS systems and MSIs are looking at what type of technology to take into account, I think first of all, it has to be, what does it do? As long as it satisfies and it can generate the data that's necessary and required, then it comes down to how easy is it to use, how simple is it to integrate with, how reliable is it, how much maintenance effort will it go, what's the commercials, is there an ongoing subscription fee, will it likely break, what's the RMA? So there's a whole series of considerations, but ultimately I think the most important one is, will it do what I need it to do? And there was a poll on LinkedIn this morning actually about comparing which takes priority, sustainability or cost. And ultimately, I think cost is a very important factor, because you can be as sustainable as you like, but if it's not cost effective to do so, then commercially it doesn't stack up. So it all comes back to choosing a device that's appropriate and fit for the purpose that it will do, and then comparing the sort of the finer points of, is it readily accessible? Is it going to pass the security questionnaires that the IS teams will have if it has to hang on a client network? Is there a long lead time? Is it eminently scalable, and will it fit with a wider portfolio of devices that will support subsequent phases of a strategy? Is it open source? Are you limited to one particular provider? It's that ongoing journey that I think people need to really, really consider, because certainly from our perspective, we want solution providers and we want software platforms to become quite wedded to our technology, and we can't do that if we're limiting their ability to operate in a commercially advantageous way. So they have to have that scalability and flexibility to be able to configure their solution to actually what the client needs.
Joy, anything to add on there? What considerations people should keep in mind?
I think I'll just resonate with kind of what Mark said is one, have to consider what is the use case first beyond, just collecting data for data's sake is not really helpful. Is it that you want to train an AI model? Is it that you want to be able to have actionable insights? Because then like really real-time insights, not, some with like a 5-minute delay, like real time, that really then changes kind of what sensor you're looking for and what provider you're looking for. I think also the make sure that it's you can't always say if something's future proofed because there's a chance that the technology in the future will change it, but as close to future proofed as you can get so that in the long term, if they decide to deploy other types of devices that may not be from the same vendor, everyone's still using a similar open communication protocol that can make it a lot easier for integratability. I also think it is extra important on the ease of implementation and maintenance side of things because customers definitely don't want to have sensors that they need to like replace wiring systems or have a ton of investment on the infrastructure side, worry about, replacing the batteries every year. They really want something as low cost and that they can, pretend it's not really there and just get the data and be done with it. So I think it's kind of considering what is the use case for the customer, what is the use case for your software solution, and then as well as what are the customers asking for? Do they want real time immediately so they can immediately go fix something, or do they want kind of more trend analysis so you can have around 10 or 5-minute delays between communication packages?
So, Henrik, you've obviously used Pressac sensors in real time for your customers. Just talk us through some of the benefits that you've found for your customers and any drawbacks that you've found from using the sensors that we provide.
Start with the drawbacks, and it's not a lot of them, but I think Joe mentioned a point that sometimes people, or in this case manufacturers, can be overwhelmed about all the data that's being collected. But as long as that is consistent and accurate, you will be able to make useful insights of that over time or in real time. Oh, what's happened? So not necessarily a drawback, but that's main that you need to think a little bit how you make use of that data. But in terms of some of the key benefits, I think this cost structure and vendor lock-in that you avoid while having a approach that Pressac does, where you only have to buy the hardware at an upfront cost, no more, no less, means that it allows us as an integrator solution provider to innovate and find ways of how we can build services on top of that without having to worry about whether we need to comply with a certain software or hardware vendor lock-in, but also allow our customers to find new applications that they would like to develop, or if they would like to, for example, pivot to a different technology or solution in the future. So that is a little bit of an aspect. Something else that's been quite well received, I think it's the easiness of using some of these sensors, where they are quite simple to install and they are non-intrusive, so you don't necessarily have to close a production line in our case to install some of these meters, which can be amount to quite a heavy cost. And it's also offering us a little bit this hands-off approach when they're actually installed. There is very, very little maintenance, and I actually think that some of our customers rarely have to go and look after the sensors and hardware. They just sit there for years and years and years and providing consistent data. So that has been very well received. Yeah, I think that's a couple of points that we have seen useful, reflecting a little bit.
The very few drawbacks was great to hear that we're doing things right for you then.
Yeah.
Just moving on, just going back to something you said earlier, Joy, and you mentioned AI and how that is going to influence the landscape of data. Do you want to go into, have you had any experience of people that have started integrating AI into their package?
I think, overall with AI, we're still in the early phases, especially as the public trust is still, needs to be gained from it overall. But we are seeing people starting to experiment with it. And I think the biggest problem or, outcome they're realizing is they need really, really good data to be able to train any AI or machine learning models. And furthermore than that, not only do they need good data, they need lots of it from various time periods, which can be complicated if they kind of just implemented it at first and are now kind of running into this problem of why none of our data is, standardized. It's not normalized. So then the AI model can't really make the relationships needed, doesn't have the volume needed to really be able to train it specifically. And so they're kind of running into these problems, which is why we're seeing people kind of turn to these solution providers to try to find ways to be able to get that normalized, standardized data, to be able to really get valuable data-driven insights that they can trust because they can trust the data. So, what Mark said, this junk data in is junk insights out. So you kind of want the opposite of that, especially when you're training an AI model, because if it will learn on that, you definitely don't want it to learn on junk data. You want it to learn on good data so that you can trust the results and, you feel that they will actually lead to optimization opportunities rather than it being nonsense.
I think this is an interesting point, actually, and one I see a lot of polarized views on online. Is a lot of platform providers, a lot of software houses will use the phrase AI, and they suggest that they use a lot of intelligent logic and a lot of LLMs and all sorts to model out and basically trying to capitalize on the phrase that is AI, when a lot of them actually really only use a complex set of rules to model out actions and activities. Whereas I think true AI is still very much in its infancy. And we're seeing it come through more and more. And some of the conversations we have with people are illustrating the goals of what they want to achieve with AI. But it is, I think, one of those buzzwords that people are using at the moment incorrectly. And certainly in the intelligent workplace and this sort of smart building sector, there's a lot of jargon and there's a lot of words used. And I think certainly historically, there's been a wide variety of definitions for each one, and everyone's had their own sort of view on what means what. But I think AI is up and coming, but there's a lot of snake oil out there at the moment when it comes to what things are capable of and what things can do. Ultimately, yes, it's all modeled on data out, and we've covered that off. But I think the true predictive nature and the benefits of AI will come, but I don't think we're quite there yet to get proper value out of it.
Batman, you muted yourself.
Sorry. Yeah, just pushing on further from that, Mark. How do you see with the introduction of AI and people's requirements? How have you seen the customers' requirements changing over the last 6 months to a year?
Well, I guess from our perspective, it hasn't changed. The goal or the role that Pressac has always played is to generate high quality real-time telemetry. Now, whether you have a lightweight data modeling platform that just makes use and does some basic visualization, or you have a full complex sort of manufacturing management suite with digital twin capability and all sorts, regarding how complex you are, the role we play doesn't change. It underpins the whole concept of an intelligent platform. Where I think that complexity is coming from is moving to get value out of the data that people can deliver. And once people realize what the data is able to do for them, or I should qualify, what appropriate data is able to do for them, then obviously that can be modified accordingly. And there's a whole series of desires and strategies and use cases that need to be supported, and people really need to just focus down on what they want to achieve, and then rely on an ecosystem of providers to come together and sort of bring their strengths and deliver something appropriate.
Yeah, I also just want to add around the kind of customer requirements. I don't know if this is over the past 6 months or a year, maybe a bit more around the last 5 years, but I think customers are starting to become a lot more aware in terms of the need for these open and communication standards, because they've kind of run into this problem of, over the past 10 years, they've deployed a ton of different types of solutions, a ton of different types of equipment, a ton of different types of sensors. And now they're like, okay, well, now it's time to bring it all together. And they're like, I actually can't. So I think customers are now starting to require kind of a lot more use of these open standards and much more aware if that's something they have to look out for than in the past, than just being like, let me just Google IoT sensor and just buy the first one that pops up that's at my price point. There's a lot more research and a lot more kind of thought process going out behind these deployments and purchases.
Well, I think we agree as well that some people may have invested in different technologies, both hardware and software over time. Maybe the specific plant in this case, or locally to a country, but then it's a global business, and then you have centralized decisions saying, now we go with this solution. And then you figure out that, oh, actually what we're already using here is not possible to integrate. And you can have a quite costly reinvestment in both hardware and software. So being able to having something that is platform agnostic is what we would frame it as. It's not always future proof, as you said, Joy. It will be that the technologies changes over time, but at least it sets up that foundation for future innovation, and also building those different subsets of use cases, whether it's using machine learning, AI, or analytics over time. So for us, it's typically so helpful to solve an initial use case, but also thinking about how these hardware and software solutions can integrate across a wider ecosystem or suite.
So that's
Sorry, Sam. I was going to say from our perspective as well. Even though the telemetry doesn't necessarily change, the data is the same. It's more about what you can derive from it and the learning that you can get. And a good example is pre-pandemic, pre-COVID, when people were looking at trying to sweat their asset and make best use of their real estate, occupancy monitoring was really, really popular in sort of the corporate real estate world, and people were trying to maximize the number of employees they could service from a number of desks. So there was particular ratios that people were targeting, and the idea obviously was that you could try and squeeze as many people in on a day-to-day basis to keep your real estate sort of footprint down. Post-pandemic, people are finding themselves with quite a large amount of real estate that is just not used. People aren't going into the office. People have got hybrid methods of working and a whole variety of different things. So the is a desk being sat at telemetry, is the desk occupied or not, as an example, has now migrated, and people are still using that as, is the desk space being used, so they can see how many people are coming into the space so they can do their footprint planning. But it's also now being, well, certainly during pandemic, it was, does that space need to be cleaned and or sanitized? So the FM teams were getting involved, and instead of doing a blanket clean across the board, obviously when people had staggered seating and all those various sort of occupation strategies, it didn't make sense for the FM teams to go around and clean everything. So they were doing targeted cleaning, and people were then finding that using that data allows sort of the soft service teams and the FM teams to become more efficient and targeted in how they operate, which ultimately increased the service levels that they were able to provide. We've also seen from that same data set people, again, the FM teams looking at the occupation trends within spaces. Do people sit in certain spaces at certain times of the day? And if so, why? Or do people avoid a particular area? And again, if so, why? And the learning that you can generate out of that does things like asset management, because you can see broken equipment, broken furniture. You can obviously do space modeling and furniture layout. If people are biasing their activities towards certain areas or certain types of space. So the reoccupation sort of strategy that people are adopting, and the furniture planning and the space planning, all rely now on having that data set, but doing a lot more with it. So the value of the data increases exponentially once people realize that it has more benefit than simply a sort of single or a binary output. And that we're seeing across all of the data output points that we can provide. Just because it does, one of our devices does one thing, but it does it well, it's like, what else can you interpret from that? And, from VM's perspective, we're seeing this quite a lot with energy monitoring. Just because you can see the current running through a cable, there's predictive maintenance, condition monitoring, future planning, operational output efficiencies, carbon load. There's loads of things that you can do with a single data point. And for a master, that's really quite exciting because it's always discovering new ways of doing more with the same. And if we can get people ultimately, obviously, able to generate additional value, that's obviously the nirvana, because it justifies ROI and it justifies business case for bigger investment and bigger expenditure.
That's very, very interesting, Mark. Just adding to that, how do you see the role of IoT evolving over the next 3 to 5 years?
I think the principles of it will be the same. People need to know what's going on. You need to understand what's going on across your real estate, whether it's industrial, manufacturing, corporate, whatever it is, in order to make decisions and act upon that data. Where there are gaps, you use IoT to fill it. If you've got incumbent systems and you can generate data, then use it. It doesn't make sense to put 2 systems in place to generate the same data output. And this is where people need to become efficient, and they need to rely on the research and the analysis that people like Verdantix do. They need to use platforms like VM and all sorts to derive the best value out. But it's not going to change the need to generate an understanding of what's going on across your workplace.
Joy, anything to add to that? The future role of IoT in the next few years?
Yeah, I think I'll just resonate a bit more. It'll be about kind of what it is today, collecting that data, but also combining it with other data sources. So if the chance that they do have kind of a modern VMS system that can get data from it, being able to connect those 2 varying disparate types of sources to, drive greater automation, only turn on the HVAC equipment if the occupancy sensor says there's somebody in there. It's a relatively simple use case, but it is one that is quite important, and actually not one that many can achieve because they just don't have that interoperability. So I think when we're looking into the future, it'll be still, the core will be around collecting that reliable amount of data, but it'll be using it to drive smarter workflows. So similar to demand-based cleaning, or smarter automation across the hardware level, on just like the hardware tech side of sensors. I think we're seeing a lot more wireless sensors, a lot more IoT gateways that help kind of collect those data sources from different types of sensors, devices, and equipment, and sensors that are really easy to deploy, which then help drive that scalability, but also allow customers to do it themselves. Although there can be problems with that. I talked to a systems integrator once who was saying that they were working with one of their customers that was saying like, oh, we implemented this occupancy sensor. It was a peel and stick one, but like the data makes no sense, and they went to go check it out, and it was installed upside down. So a bit of a drastic one, but I think the future sensors will be ones that are a lot more easy and intuitive and very obvious if they are installed incorrectly, to deploy. The ones that can, capture multiple data points as once, with indoor air quality sensors, the first few collected like CO2 and that was it, maybe 1 or 2 things. Now we have indoor air quality sensors that can collect like up to 10 different types of components within it. Devices using those modern kind of open communication protocols that we mentioned, and solutions that help get data out of those legacy equipments. I think.
Just a question there of interest. So what is the uptake, since you probably sit a little bit of more the insights of the uptake and demand for what we call industrial IoT, but also general IoT that you may be finding building and so on. Is it stable, or is it a rapid increase that you also maybe expect over 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I think it's right now it's a bit stable, but I think it'll definitely increase over the next few years, especially because especially in commercial real estate and office buildings, a lot of the equipment and systems being put in place, or that were put in place, were put in place 20 plus years ago, and thus, don't really have you can't get the like energy meter data because it's just not even close to what is needed today. So we're seeing a lot more investments in kind of those sensors, the vibration sensors that allow them to get more granular insights on the performance of the data to help drive those predictive analytics to help enable fault detection and diagnostic solutions. I think the past 5 years, a lot of the focus was around kind of occupancy sensors, especially with COVID kind of giving a big boost. Then it was indoor air quality sensors, although I will say indoor air quality sensors kind of vary by region overall, with the APAC region really being really popular over there. Also because they help they drive they're a big component in those building certificates, such as WELL and LEED. But overall, it has been slow, but I think the next big phase around IoT sensors will be around that kind of more traditional IoT sensor for the equipment, for the energy monitoring, and because the occupancy sensors kind of have been well established by now.
Brilliant. That's good news for us. There will be more to innovate as long as it's interoperable, as we said.
Henrik, you mentioned obviously VMware have offices all over the globe. Do you face any issues with the type of data that we're collecting, and how it may be transmitted? I know obviously in different parts of the world it's slightly different. Is there anything that you face when it comes to country-specific regulations and sort of protocols around that?
No, generally not. And I think in terms of using sensors from Pressac, using the Ocean protocol, which is, at least in the markets that we have been using, well workable, how to say it. So no major issues in terms of the data. And if there are some kinds of regulatorily or other types of processes, typically a way around it. But other than that, we have not seen any major issues. It might be actually more where you host the data that might be a problem, and how you interpret and process the data rather than actually collecting the data from the source. So that is just building the pipeline from where you're collecting it to where you process it and store it. But that's a different story.
Yeah, I mean, what are the sort of main security concerns when integrating with IoT devices? Mark, is there any security concerns that we hear from people?
I mean, security is always paramount, especially depending upon sort of the infra and the backhaul sort of architecture that you've got. Because if you're putting devices onto someone's network, inherently they've got to be secure. And whilst IoT networks are sort of protected against a lot of malware and a lot of nefarious activity, it is still potentially a point of vulnerability. So they do need to be locked down. They do need to be secure. And they do need to be appropriate and protected against. Because otherwise, the risk or the potential risk for sort of that data architecture and that network infrastructure side of things is something that can't be overlooked. And again, whilst one could argue that the data generated isn't necessarily going to, be the end of the world if it falls into, someone, the wrong person's hand, it's not the point. So from our side, to the point of handoff into the platform, obviously we try and encrypt and make secure as necessary. And I'm guessing obviously when Henrik consumes it and transmits it and stores it, and they have probably far more robust security policies, because they aggregate it with obviously multiple data sets which enrich the data value, but obviously then various other legislations and rules and legal sort of requirements come into play.
Yeah, and playing by the standards, I think, is it ISO 27001 or something like that, that's at least provide a lot of credibility in eyes of our customers, and that is a framework that's important. And of course it's hardware is combined with software, and making that secure in the context of particular manufacturing industries and also the wider organization is quite important these days. especially when you're actually going, in some cases, I think maybe it's more relevant at the moment in building automation, where you collect data, you process this, and then you actuate to make decisions. Actually, maybe you turn on a valve or you turn on a light and so on. And if you do that in manufacturing, turning on machine based on automation, then you need to make sure that it's reliable and not being infected, or someone is being able to put the wrong stuff in there.
Hey, so we were moving on to the Q&A section now. We've running quite well with schedule, but we don't seem to have any questions from the attendees this afternoon. So if people do have any questions, feel free to raise a hand and I can let you speak, or you can type them into the chat section. Just sort of going a little bit deeper into the choice of sensors. Mark, again, you'll probably see this better than anybody, but how do people balance the cost and performance when they're selecting their sensors? What's the sort of sweet spot between the cost and obviously performance?
If I knew that, I'd be doing something very different. It's difficult because obviously there's a balance between cost and effectiveness, and again, it depends what people want to do. You can get some relatively cheap devices which will last for a period of time and will generate the data that they need to generate. So if you've got a very short-term activity, then you're fine. If you want to put things in and forget about them and have maybe high levels of confidence that they're more robust and able to sort of withstand maybe harsher environments, then again, that is something that you've got to take into account, and ultimately will have a cost. If you're engineering something to a greater level, the investment that the sensor manufacturers put into that is increased. So again, country of manufacture is important. Some countries take quite a strong position on where a device is made and whether or not it can hang on their network or not. So again, there's tariffs, imports, charges. Tariffs obviously very relevant at the moment. How you get something into the country that is needed to operate in, again, has a whole view on things. So there's many different factors.
I think here's a small point. I saw one raising a hand, but in terms of the life cycle cost, you can have cheap sensors or buying the cheapest you find. But at least I think it has a little bit like owning a car. If you have an unreliable car, it can become quite costly and inefficient in the long run. And similarly, if you have unreliable and maybe in this case cheap hardware that is supposed to provide crucial data for your data-driven decision, and that's not typically ideal. So it might worth that a little bit slightly higher upfront cost and making sure that you have something that's actually very consistent, reliant over a life cycle, which might span from up to 10 or even more years. So that's just an important factor that we try to convene when speaking with our customers. So there was a hand up there somewhere, I think.
Yep, we have Nick Hawkins. Nick, ask away. Maybe on mute.
Yeah, I don't know if he'll be able to unmute because of the attendee, but the questions in the Q&A tab, I can read it if you want.
Yeah, if you want to.
Yeah. So it was mentioned that Pressac sensors give reliable data over many years. How long a warranty do you give? Which is one I cannot answer.
I think that's probably going to come to me, isn't it? So by default, our sensors come with a standard 12-month warranty. We do have options to extend that to a 3 or 5 year term as well. Obviously, the idea is that from a commercial perspective, from Pressac's perspective, we want to support the software platform providers because they're obviously our key sort of audience. The sensors combined with the platform create the solution. So, and having worked in software quite extensively, the goal is always to try and secure something like a 3 or 5 year contract. So it makes perfect sense to have a warranty that's aligned with a standard contract term to make the whole overall solution that software providers can offer, or the solution providers can offer, as appropriate as possible. And they feel the support because hardware should be really easy. It should just work along with the solution. So 1, 3 or 5 years on our side.
Yeah, well, I found the mute button now, so that's helpful. Thanks for picking it up. The chat isn't working. I couldn't put anything in the chat. It says it's only available during the meeting, but I could get it in Q&A. So how much of a premium does one expect to pay for the 5-year warranty over the standard 12-month?
Again, we have a standard model, which is a per unit cost with a proportionate percentage increase. Typically for a 5-year term, we'd look at 5% plus £5. So it's not massive. I think our uplift is probably slightly lower than standard market because from our experience, our failure rate or our RMA rate is very, very low. So we have a huge amount of confidence in our devices lasting, for over the longer term. But because of the fact that we do need to cover that, there is a slight uplift.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much.
That's all right.
Do we have any more questions from anybody in the group?
And it take us. There must be some questions. Typically comes a couple of minutes before people speak up.
Okay, it seems that we've got quite a shy bunch today. Henrik, just before we wrap up, any sort of closing points from yourself?
Well, not more than it's been great having the opportunity to represent us and meet you. And if there is any interest to hear a little bit more of what we do, integration, in this case, sensors or some of the other services and integrations we do, it's more than welcome to contact us. And generally speaking, we are very happy working with Pressac as an IoT provider. We do see, I see there is actually a comment in the chat, and we do see there is some interesting use cases in actually looking at the fusion of sensor data. And there's some great opportunities in the future, and especially in manufacturing, to make some great improvements. So other than that, thank you very much.
Roy, any final comments from yourself?
Yeah, I would just say if people are trying to kind of wrap their heads around kind of all the IoT sensors and all the different kind of communication protocols, I would just always recommend taking it slowly, taking it day by day, one step at a time. Don't overload yourself trying to figure out all the ins and outs all at once. Just start step by step.
Finally, Mark.
I guess from our perspective, what we see, or what I try and sort of encourage people I speak to, is don't try and design a solution yourself. Know what your end goal is, know what you want to achieve. Know what success looks like is a bit of a cheesy phrase, but know what you want the outcome to be, and then let the experts, let people work towards you and help design and support that, because everyone brings their own things to play. But yeah, when we can help engineer a solution along with all the other ecosystem partners that ultimately will support that goal.
Wonderful. Well, Henrik, Joy, Mark, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you everybody for joining us. I will be emailing out the transcript of the video that you can share with your friends and colleagues. If you do have any questions, feel free to send them over to myself and I can get them answered. Or if you want to visit either the virtual manufacturing website, Verdantix, or the Pressac website and get in contact with one of our people directly, then please feel free to do so. Thank you once again for joining. As I said at the beginning, this is going to be a series of webinars, so keep an eye out for our next one, and hopefully we'll see you again then soon. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you
Thanks,
very
everyone.
much. Have a good day. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.